Hey, welcome back to The Mother You Know, The Woman You Don't, a podcast about mothers and daughters and that relationship. We, I'm going to start out by just saying thank you guys for everything that you are doing to support our podcast every week. Our little community is continuing to grow, and our little numbers are continuing to grow, and we are meeting and talking with some really fantastic women, and we've just really enjoyed sharing that story. This week, we have a friend of Mom's. Her name is Mary Scruggs, and she lives in Hippville, where Mom lives. So, Mom, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you and Mary met and how you know each other? Because Mary's not, most of the people who have been on the show are our family or lifelong friends. And I always find that my best friendship and my closest friendships are the ones that have fallen in the last couple of years. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you met Mary and then just what your relationship is?
We met Mary at church probably about 10 years ago, just before Daddy was pastoring the church. So it was a couple of years, and we met her and her mom and dad. And so we did get to take a trip with her mother and dad to Alaska a couple of years back, which was just fantastic. And so that just really set us up for lifelong friendship. And also, Mary's been one of the most delightful person to know, and not shy. She's not shy. She's the mother of three boys, or three men now. So she, since she don't have daughters, but she's got a legendary mother. We want to hear about today. So yes, we've been friends for about 10 years.
Mothers of sons, I think, are a good breed, a tough breed, a good breed. I have two daughters and a son, and found the son often takes me. And I love him. But you got to be a different kind of, it's a different kind of parenting to be a parent of mothers as opposed to daughters. Now, I also do find it easier because it's a lot easier to say, suck it up to them and move on your way than it is to, tell it to girls. But so Mary, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you were born and or a little bit about your history, your parents' history, your mom's history, what you know about her and where she was born.
Well, I was born in Lamar, Texas, and that's in the Galveston County area. My mom was born in Hitchcock, Texas, and she actually graduated high school in Hitchcock, which has always been a big family joke. Because anybody from Hitchcock, sorry, but it's always been a joke that my mom graduated from a small town like Hitchcock, and then we end up in a small town like Hippville.
I feel like it's even smaller. Like you went from Hitchcock to Hippville.
So we're familiar with Hitchcock because we have family there. Okay, yeah, we live in Hitchcock. So yeah, my mom grew up very poor. In fact, she grew up extremely poor, to the fact that they never knew where the next meal. She was the type of family where they didn't know what their next meal was going to come. So because of that, my mom loved her to death, and she would die if she was alive, and she heard me say this. But my mom was a hoarder, a very bad hoarder. We have.
Well, tell me your mom's name first. Tell me your mom's name.
Margaret James. Margaret Ellen James.
Yeah.
Was Margaret James. And we have 5 freezers in our garage when they died. Of course, we still have 5 freezers full of food. And I think my dad always said, and we had a bedroom that was full of food. In fact, to this, my mom will be gone 2 years, December the 30th. And I have never had to buy toilet paper. I haven't had to buy paper towels. I haven't had to buy any canned food. I don't have to buy any meat.
So I know where I need to come whenever we have a toilet paper shortage.
And my dad always said it was because when she grew up, she never knew where her next meal was going to come. So we eat well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a common thing, isn't it, Mom? Like, haven't you heard, isn't that a common thing? Like with people who grew up. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially for people who grew up as poor as my mom did.
Yeah.
I know that she used to tell stories about my grandmother, and, they used to have cornbread and milk, a lot of cornbread and milk for dinner to, fill her food more than. So my grandmother had a garden, so they had the vegetables, but it wasn't meat or anything like that. They had a cow, which I gave them the milk that they needed. And I remember my mom telling me a story once about the cow got sick, and my grandfather laid hands on his cow and prayed for his cow. And the next day, the cow was good to go. So, it's like the cow's family.
Yeah. Jesus so safe. Look at him.
Yes. But I grew up with a lot of respect for my mother. My mother went through a lot. Not to diminish my father. I love my father to death. I was the only girl. I was the middle child, the only girl of 3 kids. So I was well spoiled growing up, and my dad saw to that. But my dad was not the best guy when he was younger. Let's just put it that way. And my mom put up with a lot, and we knew it. My mom put up with a lot, but she saw it through because dad was the love of her life, and she just saw it through. And I remember my grandmother telling my mom that he was the way he was because his mom wasn't the best mom, and so he needed a good woman and a good mom. So my grandmother worshipped the ground my father walked,
Yeah.
and which was hard on my mom. But in some ways, I've been married more than once. But in some ways, I guess seeing what my mom went through got me to the point to where I don't take a whole lot off of people. If you don't like it the way I am, there's the door. Don't let it hit you in the bell on the way out. And, it's like, I'm not going to do what my mom did, which I guess some people go the other way, but I'm just like, I'm not going to be treated that way.
Yeah.
But my mom was the almost the last child of 13 kids. Will ever do it. Yes. Now, they weren't all my grandmother's kids.
Yeah.
My grandfather was like 20 years older than my grandfather. So her sisters and brothers were in their 30s or 20s when she was born. And then my uncle, Everett, was born after her. So, yeah,
Yeah.
back then, I guess you had a lot of kids. Yeah.
No TV, apparently. Yeah.
When I was, when my oldest brother was 21, he died on going out to an offshore drilling. I'll never forget that. That had been the worst time of my family's life, and when I saw what me and my brother went through, but when I saw what my mom went through, it's like I just don't see. I admire any woman who loses a child.
Yeah. I was going to
And
say
goes,
there's a definite, I think with anybody we've known that's lost a child, there's a definite personality thing that happens where there's a before and an after. And it's like
yes,
they might be the same person they were, but it's slightly altered.
it is. It is. And your family's never the same. It is never.
What do you remember about your mom after that time? Like, do you remember a big shift in who she was? Or do you
I
remember a
do.
streak that she just
I
displayed
remember
after that?
when my brother died. I remember the night that they came to tell us. I was up with my middle child. It was my youngest child at the time, and I was going through a divorce, and I was living with my parents. And the knock on the door, and I answered the door, and I knew it was bad. And I went and tried to wake up my dad without waking up. Of course, when I woke up my dad, it woke up mom. And I tried to stop her from going in the kitchen, but she plowed through and went in there anyway. And I remember my mom had a dream. I'm not trying to get ahead of myself. My mom had a dream. She thought it was my child.
Yeah.
And it was of a child dying. And it was an infant dying in her dream. And in that dream, the mother was laying there saying, my baby, please don't take my baby.
Yeah.
Well, 5 days later, my brother died. And my mom was repeating that. God, you
Yeah.
can't take the baby.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
Kept thinking about him too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my mom's had those kind of dreams before, and she never could put
her hand or finger on what the dream was actually about, but it's always somebody in the family that she was dreaming about. But it was never who she thought it was going to be, because she thought, of course, it was one of my children was going to die.
Yeah.
And because I had the babies here. Well, and then it ended up being my brother.
Yeah. And Mom, you said Grandma had a dream too when Yvonne died, didn't she?
Did. She did.
Yeah.
The Lord woke her up and need to be ready for what's to come. Mm-hmm. And she was just at peace because she just thought the Lord was fixing to call her. Mm-hmm. You know, she was okay with that. We had to let her know our baby sister Yvonne was about 30 something, had been. So it does, you know, a lot goes to your, really compassion and literally understanding exactly what they go through to a certain extent. But yeah, it does change. It does. It does. My mom was not the same person. If you knew my mom before my brother died and you knew my mom now, my mom was not the same person. And none of us were really the same people, because it affected my relationship with my younger brother. It affected my relationship with my parents, because it just was such a tragic thing. And I can't express enough how much it changes a family to lose a child. My
there's
kids
a
are supposed to
dynamic.
bury me. My kids are supposed to bury me. I am not supposed to bury them. And that's just
But even for
the way it
siblings,
works.
there's a dynamic of having an older child and a middle child and a younger child, and you have roles, I think, that you play. And when one of those are taken away, it's like you're now the oldest child living, the living child, and it changes and shifts the dynamic. I imagine it is a huge shift.
I can't get over feeling like
an orphan.
But there's some funny sides to my mom.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can remember. And this is not really a funny story, but it kind of is now. My father was Melvin Wayne James Sr. There was another Melvin Wayne James Sr. who lived alone.
Yeah.
And I guess he didn't have the best credit in the world. And so they called my mom, Montgomery Wards did, to collect money back when I was a kid. And my mom's like, I've never even had a credit card from y'all. Well, when they realized his wife's name is Shirley. Well, my parents moved to Dickinson, and the other guy moved to Dickinson. So it's kind of like he followed my parents around, without knowing about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one night, we get a phone. My dad worked in Wyoming. He always worked off because he had 3 kids. He had to support 3 kids. And my grandmother answered the phone about 3 in the morning. So she comes in there and she wakes up my mom. She says, Margaret, who was on the phone? My mom's like, I don't know who was on the phone. Who was on the phone? Well, then my grandmother gets this call, or we get this call. And the call was, wake up, Melvin. Dad died. And they hang up. My goodness. Wake up, Melvin. Dad died. My grandfather is in Texas City. My dad's name Melvin. My brother's name is Melvin. So we couldn't figure out if it was wake up my dad because my grandfather died, or wake up Melvin, my brother, because my dad died. My goodness. So we're all 3 sitting around the table thinking, what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do? Because we don't want to call my grandparents and wake them up. Couldn't get Dad on the phone. Then my mother realized the other Melvin Wayne James Sr.
Yeah.
So she looks him up on the phone book, because back then you didn't have the internet. And it's about 3 in the morning. She calls him on the phone. She says, I apologize for calling y'all. We got the strangest phone call, and we don't know if it's for us. And as soon as she said what it was for them.
Gosh. Yeah.
I just panicked myself.
Yeah.
And, it was me and my mom, my grandma sitting on the table going, first who died? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny now. You don't think that's been funny at all.
Yeah.
It wasn't because, my dad was at home. Melvin, of course, was at home. But still, we're like, okay, we did, because everybody's name was Melvin.
Yeah. I think it's time to change names. I think it's time.
Anyway, so, and then let's see, before my parents moved here, my parents had a campground in Rayburn country.
Uh-huh.
And so we would all go up there once a year and have like a family get together in their camp. Well, me and my mom and my 3 boys went up there for a week. And then my brother and my dad and all them came up later. Well, one time my oldest son caught a catfish. And I'm not fisherman, I'm not a hunter. I don't like touch fish. I don't like catch fish. I don't want anything to do with fish. I'll cook them, but that's not all you're gonna get me to do. So my mom, so I'm trying to get this catfish off the line, and I'm not touching this fish. So I take the line, and I'm biting the line, so I don't have to touch the fish, and the fish will drop in the basket. Well, the fish missed the basket. I landed on the pier. My mom gets on her hands and knees and is slapping at this fish like this. She didn't want my son to lose his fish.
The good grandma.
She's yelling at me because I wouldn't touch the fish in the first place. And then my son says, that would be so funny on those funniest home videos. Because you remember
Yeah.
that show is on? Yeah.
Look at that, like $1,000 winner. I think Mel Margaret doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good.
So I'm like, wait, no.
You tell me, Grandma.
I have a hard, fast rule. I'm not touching fish, deer. We went dove hunting a couple of weeks ago. I did pick one up. I looked at Dwayne. I go, he's right there. You should get him. Go grab him. I'm not doing it.
I don't fish and I don't hunt.
Yeah.
I don't clean them. I won't cook them and eat them. But that's
Nope.
as far as I go with them.
I told Dwayne that's why I married up, so you could do it for me.
Like, you go kill all the deer and clean them that you want to. But as far as I go, I will clean them and eat. I will cook them and eat them.
Yes, that's my job.
Thank you. That's what my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a good cook. So it all kind of got passed down. Oh, I got to tell you this. That reminds me, speaking of cooking. But my mom and dad got married. She literally could not boil water. And when I say could not boil water, when my mom and my dad was in the service,
Okay.
and my dad comes and picks up my mom and takes her to Virginia. My oldest brother was there. Well, she's, I don't know, she's pregnant. And she puts a pot on the stove to boil some water to exit. Forgets the pot's on the stove and goes next door to the neighbor's house to have a cup of coffee. My dad comes home to a house that is, the pot is melted into the stove and smoke is everywhere. Of course, he's on his hands and knees looking for his pregnant wife, who he thinks is now passed out due to smoke inhalation. Mom's still next door having a cup of coffee.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, actually,
So when
I
I
think,
said my
yeah.
mom could not boil water, she could
Yeah.
not boil water.
Well, but that's how you learn, by burning a few eggs.
And needless to say, she learned to be a very good cook. Yes. Yes.
So your mom, what did they do for a living? What did your parents do? You said your dad was in Wyoming.
When my dad got out of the service, he worked for the post office.
Mhm.
And then his main job, though, was working for offshore drilling rigs. So back then, you didn't need a college degree to get a job doing that. My son does the same thing my dad did. He has a college degree, though. He had to get one to do that. And my dad traveled. So my mom really races by herself. And because my dad was off working and traveling and sending money home, of course, but he traveled a lot. He was in Wyoming a lot, Alaska a lot. I remember my mom, we were going to move to Wyoming, and they were going to transfer us to Wyoming. So they send my mom up there to see how she likes it. Well, they take my mom up there during the middle of the winter to Wyoming. And a woman from Texas goes to Wyoming in the middle of winter. And then she's walking across the road, and I guess she must have stepped in a ditch or something. And she went from stepping on snow to snow up to her chest. She told my dad, if you just get me home, I will never leave Texas again. So needless to say, we did not move to Wyoming. I guess not. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
well,
you
it's a
you
lot of
grew up.
snow. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So your whole life you've been in Texas.
Yes. My grandparents were all born in Texas. Parents were all born in Texas.
It feels fair.
And my kids have all been, in Texas. But I'm trying to think of some more stories that my mom did. My grandmother always lived with us. And that was something that my dad insisted because my grandmother moved in with us back when I was just a baby.
Yeah. It's your dad's mom or your mom's mom?
My mom's,
Okay.
she always lived with us. I always shared the room with her. I always said when I lived with my mom, I lost two mothers in my life. Because at one time, because my mom did work up until she was 32. She worked at Carbine in Texas City or Lamar.
Mm-hmm.
And so my grandmother raised us up until then. And my youngest brother called my mom Margaret and my grandmother Mom. Well, the one time we were on vacation, and my dad heard him saying Margaret one too many times. And he slams the brakes on and turns around and said, "That is not Margaret. That is your mother. Don't let me hear you call her Margaret again." And
Yeah.
then he leaned over to me and says, "Mary, that's not Margaret. It's Mom."
But how did your mom feel about that? How did your mom feel about that? Did she
Well,
mind
yeah,
that?
at the time, and just the way it was. She didn't even
Yeah.
feel it, I guess,
Yeah.
until my
Yeah.
dad put a stop to it, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I still get a little touchy because I think Cody, I think sometime this last weekend or something, Cody said something. And I looked at Dwayne. I said, "Did he just call that woman mom?" And he goes, "No." He said, whatever. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Because I'm fixing to fight somebody. But
Yeah,
yeah, I get real particular about that. Now, the girls have always called their dad's mom, and that never bothered me because I felt like she, just like mom, like they were taking care of our kids and raising our kids when they were
mhm.
little. So that never fazed me because she was just so wonderful. But other people, I don't find that funny. Not even a little.
So, but my grandmother went on vacations with us. She was just the
Yeah.
sixth person in our family, because she was
Yeah.
just always there.
What do you remember about her? What do you remember similarities between her and your mother?
Well, let's see.
Or
My
were they
grandmother
different?
was a very unspoken woman. She would just say what she thought. Now, my grandmother was a very, very, very good Christian. She was a very good Christian woman. So you never heard her say anything bad about anybody. Until one time, my uncle, which was her son, had done something. And I forgot what he had done. And the next thing you know, my grandmother looked at me and says, and just started cussing and just saying bad stuff about him. And we were all just like,
Also, how
grandmother never, ever said anything like that.
how old was she at that time? Because I'm down this perimenopause rabbit, and I just feel
I
like
know she was
there's
almost
something
70.
about.
Yeah, she
Yeah, okay.
was. I know.
See, because I'm finding a lot of
That's
freedom in
something
being
that
50.
happens. Your filter wears out, and and so we were just like, what? And she like, that's just the way it is. I said, well, he's your son. Well, he's a grown man. Okay, but she had a lifetime. And then one time, my mom and dad were in a fight, a big fight, and my grandmother was running behind my dad because my mom was running down the hallway. My dad was running after her. My grandmother was running after my dad, going, "Melvin, if you just slap her down, Melvin, slap her down." And she wouldn't do that. And Melvin's like, "For Melvin."
Mom probably went wrong. Oh, that's funny.
My great grandmother and my grandmother just loved my dad. My great grandmother, Grandma Berry, I'll never forget that. She was 92 when she died. Her mom was 102. So longevity lasts.
Yeah.
I remember going to see my great grandmother with my parents, and my great grandmother comes out and says, Melvin, you just get better looking every time I see you. Margaret, you sure are getting.
I know we're tougher on our daughters, aren't we?
Oh, there was nothing like my dad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny because Mom and Dwayne have a close relationship. They're fun. They go and talk and do gardening, talk fishing, and do all the stuff, and we're usually just sitting back going, "Y'all have fun, go do whatever."
You know, I never knew my grandfather. So my grandfather died. My grandfather, my mom and dad went out for their second date. My grandfather looked at my grandmother and said, those two will marry, but I won't live with them. And a week later, the very next Sunday, my grandparents go to church. My grandfather stands up, testifies, sit down.
Gosh, in church?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And then about a month later, so my parents.
What did he die from?
He was 80 something years old and died of a heart attack.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a common thing that people, when you get older, you start. Yeah, or when you get older, you start. I wonder how many people start having premonitions about they're dying because, like you're saying,
my
grandma
mom
had a death.
The next one to go. She knew that. I asked her one time I was walking and she was riding a little scooter, and I said, "Mom, do you ever wonder who would be the next one in the family to go?" Because it had been a while, and I don't know why I asked her the question. She said it'll be me, and I said, "How do you know it's going to be you?" She said, "Because God made me a promise when Melvin died, which was my brother, that I would not have to see another death." Yeah. And when my mom died, which was only 2 years, December 3rd, I took my dad to the hospital. Well, we were shopping the day before my mom died in Lufkin, Kinston, all day shopping, had a great time. The next day, my dad was getting really sick. And I took my dad to the emergency room in Lufkin. While they were gone, she looked at George and she said, "Go," because I took care of my parents and did all the cooking and everything. She said, "Go look in the freezer and see what Mary's got out there, because they're going to put down." And so George went outside, looked in the freezer. They had their little menus made out for the week. And she looked at George. She says, "I'm going to take a nap. Call me when Mary calls so we know what's going on." He says, "Okay." They didn't keep my dad. I argued with him, and I said, "You need to keep him." It was only God that didn't keep him. Yeah. When we got home, we were getting Dad out of the truck, and George says, "There's something wrong with Mom." And I said, "What's wrong with her?" And he looks at me real funny and he says, "If I'm not mistaken, I would swear she was gone." Well, when he said that, I dropped my dad in the middle of the garage, and I ran. And I went in there, and as soon as I looked at her, I knew she was gone. And I'm grabbing the phone, and I said, "Dad," I'm screaming at this point, going, "What do I do? What do I do?" And he says, "Call 911, tell her she's unresponsive." So that's what I did. And I called 911, tell her she was unresponsive. And then, of course, I called your mom and dad. Yeah. And I told them that Mom was gone, and she died while we were at the emergency room. And like I said, it was on a job that he didn't get. 2 days later, he had to go back to the hospital. I took him straight to Houston, and they kept him.
Yeah.
My dad should have died then, but he fought to come back, and he kept saying till the doctor.
Yeah.
And then 42 days later, Mom.
Yeah. I remember them being close together or passing away close together. So you really had to deal with a lot of loss really quickly.
That was a blessing in disguise for Dad to follow Mom so quickly, or
Would you rather be sick? Well, for me, it was the hardest thing I'd ever been through. And I remember telling Dad, Dad, you got to get better. You can't go. I can't bury both of you I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I think that's why he hung on as long as he did. Finally, I told Dad, because when he woke me up, he was talking to my mom and he was talking to my brother. And I remember him, the reason why I know he's talking to my brother is because he kept telling him, your sister took such good care of us. Your sister's taking such good care of us. So I know you're talking to my brother. And I finally looked at my dad and I said, God's here. It's okay to go with him. I will be okay. And that's what I called your dad.
And that's a peace that only comes from God, I think. To lose that, but to be not okay with it, because you're not obviously okay with it, but be okay. Not okay with it, but okay. You're fine.
But when Daniel went over there, he had scripture already read. He said, we're just going to sit here and read heaven, and God has a mansion for us in heaven, and we go on home. And he looked at us, he says, I think he's gone. And he was. I'm glad my brother was there. See, my brother wasn't there when my mom died.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both cremated, so he didn't get the closure I did, seeing my mom, but he did.
And I almost feel the opposite about cremation. I think to me, it gives you a sense of peace more so than a body. Because to me, a body doesn't feel not even final.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Cremation to me, ashes, pretty final.
Yeah, the ashes dust to dust. So,
But I feel more peace having been to both types of funerals with the cremation. And I was against it at first, but I think over the years I've just been like,
yeah, because Danny and I talked about doing the science technique.
And that's it's a
direct cremation and all. And I remember you saying, "Look, that ain't." And so
early on,
change your mind, have you?
Yeah, I have. But it was probably 20 years ago too when I was, whatever.
At least 10, a burial plot.
Yeah,
And where my brother lived, it's my brother, and there was somebody moving my dad who they gave to me now. But we're going to go the same way because it's just so. And we're going to be out where my parents are, which is in they're in the National Cemetery in Houston, Banners.
Okay.
And that's where we'll be put. And the only thing we had to pay for was a urn.
Yeah.
And of course, I have a necklace with my mom's ashes in it, and I have a key ring stuff with my dad's ashes. But other than that, that's all we had to pay for. Science Care took care of everything. We did the thing at the church, and then you do it at the National Cemetery in Houston, and that's free. So we have a beautiful place out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I can do the ashes thing in jewelry or like, who was it? We have a cousin who has her dad on the coffee table and her mom. Like, I love y'all, but I don't think I could do that.
And Pam's in a glass orb.
Yeah, that's what I mean. She's in an orb.
And people, say that's beautiful, G.
I know. No, I know. I know. I think for people, it's fantastic.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm a to each his own. I'm not bad about, whatever, but I'm thinking, I don't know. I love you. I love you.
The actual heart, the keychain.
Yeah.
I had to go for my dad to have my mom's ashes in, but he died so quickly after my mom. That's my dad's ashes.
Yeah. No, I've seen the jewelry is beauty, and I've seen it done with, like, people have done it with breast milk, which I think is weird. Have done it with placenta, which is weird. They have done it with like all kinds of stuff that just you can do anything with jewelry now, which is fine. But it's just like it's not for me.
I love my kids, and I love my placenta when they were born, and can just go wherever I go.
It's a thing, y'all. It's a thing. I don't know. So, but
my mom was very funny. She in some ways, she had a really hard life because my dad wasn't a Christian when they got married. And so, and I'm not saying anything bad about dad. It's just the way it was. He just wasn't a Christian when they got married, you know. So, and she saw him through all kinds of stuff that he had done. Now, my dad never let him alone. My dad never, ever spoke as far as speaking down to her. He never cussed her or anything like that. I want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
My dad did. He had extramarital affairs, I guess. I will say it because I mean, people did. That was when he was young. But my mom, you know, but my dad was a very good Christian man. And I want to make sure that is clear. My dad was a very good Christian man when he got older and he really got saved.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is my uncle, which was my grandmother's son, my mother's brother, he was not. They hung together, let's put it that way. And my grandmother, my uncle and my dad was an extension of my grandmother's prayer. Because my grandmother prayed for those two men, and both of them gave their hearts to God and lived for God and went to heaven. My grandmother never got to see it, but she saw it. Like
And that's the life changing. Your mother she went to Bible school too.
they both did.
Her and my dad was a after he got saved.
Yeah.
No, she didn't Bible school.
My mom was a Assembly of God. I was raised Assembly of God. Yes. I always say Assembly of God is a modern day Pentecost.
Oh, yeah.
So we're allowed to cut
I
our hair.
remember his stories was she was such a sweet little Christian and he was a bad.
Yes.
He was a real man.
Yeah. And seeing the change in my dad from when I was a younger kid to when I was, you know, and I mean, we're talking the last 30 years of his life. So we're not talking, you know, my dad, Deacon, he was everything. I mean, he went to Bible school. I mean, when he was exactly, you know, when he changed his life, God changed his life. My dad didn't allow alcohol in his house. He didn't allow smoking in his house. And, you know, he didn't allow any of that. He wouldn't even watch a show if it had a bad word on it. You know, he watched, God changed my father. And I can't say that enough because he did. But just when he was younger, he just was a bad kid, a bad guy, you know. But he was a great dad, you know. But my mom had a hard life, you know, because my dad made it like he was a really good Christian when she met but my mom and dad knew each other 2 weeks when they got. Yeah. I think that was
Quick.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know how old they were when they got married?
My mom was 20, I think, and my dad was 25.
Yeah, not like 14 and 15 or 14
When-
and 19.
My two grandmothers and grandfathers went to church together at the same church. So when my dad came home from the Navy, they took my dad to meet my mom. My mom met my dad when she was in her bathrobe and curl.
Okay,
And she just wasn't interested in, you know,
didn't care.
no. My dad leaves their house, calls his best friend and said, I want you to be the best man at my wedding. Sets it up with Ghost and her. They went on, it was a Saturday. They went to church together on Sunday. He calls the preacher at her church and says, I want you to do our wedding. And he hasn't mentioned anything to my mom yet.
Margaret,
I was just saying, did he ask her? Because if
No.
she was a curler, she clearly did not care.
After all this is set up, he gets everything set up and ready to go. Then he goes and asks my mom to marry him. Tells his parents they're getting married and everything.
Yeah. And she
Yeah.
said yes after 2 weeks after she met him. Okay.
And then that was 2 weeks. He leaves, has to go back. And then I think he came back a month later when they actually got married. But they only actually knew each other 2 weeks.
Yeah. And then they were married for how many years? Yeah, she was like 60-something years.
Yeah, 62 years they were married.
Well, there's something to be said for.
And it's fun to hear them tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it from their mouth.
Yeah. They were married 62 years on December the 17th.
Uh-huh.
My mom told me please take a lot of pictures. This will be our. And of course, we have a lady in our community out here who lived to be 104, I think. This is wrong. So I always said, until you're older than her, you're good. Yeah. And then my mom died December 30th.
There's something to be said for fighting for, if you're saying, like she had to deal with a lot of stuff with your dad, but there's something to be said about fighting for your marriage and fighting for your family and putting through all that, tolerating and tolerating and tolerating and letting God swoop in and change things.
Oh, yeah.
And then still be invested, because people just don't do that anymore. People don't
No.
fight anymore, or, whatever. I have the girl's dad, and then I'm married now. And it was too easy to walk away from that other relationship, So that's a lesson learned for me, that Dwayne and I have been married 25 years, and it's like I don't think people, I don't know if it's just not taught or if it's not talked about or whatever. So I'm always impressed by those stories that people are like, yeah, hang on for 60 years and this changed, because it's like people don't stay in it long enough to see a change. I think people get irritated and then they move on. It's like, and with the exception of, like, I'm not talking about people taking abuse, because I'm thinking, I don't know if I'd have the patience to tolerate somebody who, if Dwayne cheated. I'd probably run him over with the car, but
my parents loved each other very much.
yeah.
My dad loved my mom.
Yeah.
He just wasn't, my dad wasn't raised to be, my grandfather was that way with my grandmother. So that's what he was taught. That's the way he was shown it should be. So when my mom got married, it just wasn't the same.
It's definitely generational curses, right?
It is too.
And then breaking those, which through God, it sounded like he did.
It's God healing, what's going on. Because, God did. I know that my dad, I think he spent the last 30 years of his life trying to make up for the first 30. It really bothered my father the way he was when he was younger.
When he always talked about your mother, like this is
yes. Yeah, that brings tears in his eyes.
She's either his lady or his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's sweet.
Those are so sweet.
Yeah. To me, that's healing. That using that language can be healing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My dad
so Mary,
all daughter, my mom the same way.
Well, that's always good to hear. So tell me a little bit about you growing up. You obviously grew up in a Christian home.
Well, yes. When I was growing up, now when I was younger, of course, my grandmother's. But as I got older, my parents, went, they went to church with me. Being the only girl, really, it's hard to explain to people who aren't an only girl. But being the only girl, I was spoiled by everybody in the family. With my brothers, my parents, when I got married the first time, my wedding cost, my dad went to work and said, my daughter's getting married. Don't let a job go out that I'm not on. And my wedding back then cost $10,000. I think my parents paid for it. And that was 45 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Today, but back then.
Yeah, exactly. But the same wedding today would be, and that was just one example. I remember my dad went out and bought me a pair of shoes that was $64 back when I was in high school in the 70s. And in the 70s, paying $64 for a pair of shoes was like paying $300 for $400 for a pair of shoes now.
Yeah.
And I always like to go shopping with my dad because my dad never said no to me. And he didn't. He never said no to me. Didn't matter what I wanted to do, anything. I remember my first date was allowed to date till I was 16. When I got married, I had 17 formals hanging in my closet because I had to have a formal for every dance I had, and wasn't allowed to wear the same formal. So I had 17 formals hanging in my closet. My first date, my dad calls home and said, "Was Mary still there?" And my mom says, "Yes." And my mom knew my dad had been drinking because, she says, "You're about to miss her going out on the first date." He says, "Yeah, I know."
So he was working that state again?
No, he was home. He was good to be here to see me go out. So, but anyway, it was, and I was mean. I was very mean. I was mean to my brothers. I was mean to everybody. And I never wanted to have a sister. Never wanted a sister. I was good being the only girl. Imagine. So
Well, what were
say
you like?
mean,
Or you still school?
no, I was mean.
Oh, okay.
I remember once my grandmother's house, and this was my dad's mom. My brother he was looking in the closet for something my grandmother said for, and I knew what it was, and I told him where it was, and he couldn't find it. And he was on the floor sitting down. He said, "I can't find it." And I grabbed him by the hair and drug him to the closet by his hair and said, "It's right. I told you it was." No, I was mean.
Was that
It's
your
called aggressively,
It's right down your breath.
Mary, it's called aggressively helpful. That's all that is. We learned that early on in the podcast. It's aggressively helpful and it's completely warranted.
And the first day, it was an ROTC ball.
Uh-huh.
And there was red and white ball. So I had this white dress. And the first thing my dad said, "Looks like a wedding dress to me." You know. And it was the floor, it was all under the floor. My oldest brother went too. And I was out dancing with different people. Well, by the end of the night, I was sitting in the corner and nobody, not even the guy that took me, would speak to me. Come to find out, my brother, every time he saw me dance with somebody, would go to them and say, "You see that girl you just danced with? That is my sister. Don't you ever let me see you touch her or get near her again."
My goodness. Well,
So I'm like, and I had no idea. He didn't take a date or nothing. He wouldn't stand just because I was going.
it's a good thing.
That's big brother love.
He protected me, brother. When I was in high school, and somebody walked me to the car, somebody else would go tell Melvin, "Hey, this person wants your sister to the car." And then he would go find him and say, "Don't you dare ever." My sister else I used to hold her own.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So my mom always taught us to be close, and I passed that down to my kids. So I always told them your brothers are the ones that know you from cradle to grave. They're the ones that's going to be there no matter what. And moms aren't going to always be there, but they will be.
And so, how old were you when you first got married? Or I wanted to ask you, what kind of child were you growing up? But I think you answered that. You were just sassy. That's all. How old were you when you first got married or when you first had kids?
Well, I was really stupid when I was young. Very stupid. I got married the day after I turned 18. I was still in high school. I graduated, but I was still in high school. And I had the longest name of my graduating class. So my father said, "I paid 18 years of school. James was going to be in there somewhere." And I always thought Mary James Prophet sounded stupid. So I had Mary Margaret James Prophet on my diploma. And so,
Yeah, we're 40 that great way.
yeah. And then I married a man who was, he was a God preacher's son. And I remember my ex-father-in-law telling me, "I remember the day that God called Mark." Mark never said that. His father said that. And my mom, and so my father-in-law, his house was, he, he ruled it with an iron hand. He didn't like handle my mother-in-law, but she was whatever he said went. Well, as you can tell with my personality, what people said just didn't go. Okay.
The dog's not going to hunt around here.
So get me to
He
be
forgot you were male with Jody before.
so to get me to act like my mother-in-law, my first husband beat on. And so that only lasts. My dad said, if I know it's only gonna last 5 years, I'd have gave you money to let you go alone.
Let's get the 10,000.
Exactly. But I had 2 kids and then I ended up divorced. I told him my dad didn't beat on me.
So did that start right away, or was it something that was happened over?
About a year
So-
after we got married.
Yeah.
It started.
Yeah. And what made you decide this is a no for me?
Well, I saw a show that said men who beat on their wives don't want people to know that they beat on their wives. So if you get into a situation, bring attention to what's going on. And he was getting mad and he hit me. And I had my baby, Kenny, was just an infant. I was still nursing in my arms. And I looked out the window and I saw the neighbor outside. So I opened the front door and I was sitting in the doorway. And he was holding Scott, which was my oldest son, in his arms. He was begging for me, crying and begging for me with his arms out. And it's almost like an out of body experience, where I could see what was going on to somebody else. But, how you can see somebody else, you need to leave that person, but you can't see it for yourself. And I thought, what am I doing to my children if I'm going to allow them to be raised this way? And in that show, it said that if you stay with a man who beats you and you have sons without telling them it's okay, you're showing them it's okay to beat their wives. Well, if you have daughters, you're teaching them that that's the way they should be treated when they're older. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. And he went to work. I called my dad and said, I'll be at the neighbor's house. You need to come get me. And I was the other side of Dallas.
Yeah. Was
And
that
was
it that night or just
It was
shortly
that
there?
night. It
Yeah.
was 9:00 at night. Him and a friend of my dad's came and got me and the boys. And by the time I got off work, we had already gone back to the house, packed up all of our stuff. They came with the trailer. I said, I'm done. I can't do this.
So was he aware that you were being abused?
My dad was. I left Mark more than once.
Oh,
Yeah, I had left Mark more than once. And I kept going back, which really killed my dad.
or him for his tip, but his tip.
That's what I was wondering, I guess, is if it was a progressive thing or if it was like a.
I guess it was my mom had put up with so much from my dad and they were married forever. And that's what I came from. So it's like I need to make sure my children. But then I realized my children were better off in a broken home than they were in the situation they were in. Yeah. Because my parents' problems when they were younger were my parents' problems. It didn't affect us in the way that him hitting me affected.
No, that's damaging.
Than a religious abuse.
And does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, it's just.
Would you say a religious?
Yeah, a religious abuser. There's nothing worse than someone who takes a spiritual thing and turns it into, narcissistic something. I don't know. Yeah, but
And then, so how long? You said you had 3 boys, so you have 2 boys leaving that marriage, and then how long before your next
I got married
son?
again.
Yeah.
And I had another child, 4 years. I got pregnant not long after I got married the second time, and I lost that child. And then 2 years later, I had another child, which is their half brother, Alex.
Okay. Yeah. So what was it like for you being a mom of 3 boys?
Well, let me tell you what I told another lady after I had my youngest son. She called me on the phone. She says, I didn't know you were afraid of those things. She had one. It's two girls. I said, utter chaos is normal for my house. If I didn't have utter chaos, and I had two boys who thought their mom was the greatest thing since peanut butter. Why would I want to have a girl who would think that about their dad? I'm like, I'm good with this. Yeah. You're always. I mean, a mother has not been loved till she's been loved a little boy.
It's definitely different.
Yes. And a little boy just worships the ground that his mama walks on, which is the way it should be. A girl does that to her dad normally. So, but yeah.
Usually wants to fight her mom. So what is one of the things, like, when you think about, because you've had obviously some really great women in your life, your grandmother, your mother, raising and being intricate in your day-to-day upbringing. What are some of the things you think you learned from them that you pass on to your children? And what is something that you think, yeah, I'm not doing that with my kids, that you maybe drop that?
Well, with my mom, especially with me being the only girl, I was the first one to leave home. The other two boys were still at home. It was real hard for my mom to let go.
Same.
And she would be very outspoken when things would not be going right in my marriage or whatever. And I think that, and I was to the point to where I didn't want to be that way when it was time to let go of my children. Don't get me wrong. When my kids were at home and they were young, I thought, remember the movie Dallas?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this son got married and lived in this bedroom, and this son got married. Yeah. To me, that was the perfect way my life should go. Letting go of my children.
And my kids think I'm crazy for thinking that.
No. I mean, they were thinking my kids were going to leave my house one day. I would just tear up and just start crying, thinking, I don't know how I can live without my children. With their relationships and that kind of thing. So I'm grandma, and that's one thing I learned not to do with my mom. And my and she learned that from her mom because her mom lived with us. And like I said, anytime my mom and dad got into a fight, my grandmother put her 2 cents in because she was just there.
And she could.
Dad's side, but she was still, put her 2 cents in. So, and I wanted to make sure that I actually, and I will have to say this, my ex-mother-in-law, my first mother-in-law is gone now. But I learned how to be a mother-in-law from her. She was an awesome mother-in-law. She never interfered. She just was a loving Christian woman. And that's where I really learned how to be a mother-in-law, was from Ruth the Prophet. But now the things that I learned from my mom is my mom loved us unconditionally. And that's the way I feel about my kids. And they know. Just every so often, I'll just send them a message going, Mom loves you. I haven't told you in a while, but Mom loves me, because you never know what's going to happen, And if the last text that they get from me is that Mom loved them, then they always knew, hey, my mom loved me. I always tell my oldest son went down a hard road. He got into drugs, he drank, and that kind of thing. It's only God he survived, but he did. He's a great man, a good father now, and he's, doesn't even speed or anything because he doesn't break the law in any way at this point. And I always told my kids how proud I am of them. Because that's something that kids need to be told. You need to be told, hey, I'm proud of you. I love you. And, and I always, even now, I tell them. Can't wait to see him. We'll see him all of a sudden tomorrow. He'll be 42.
Well, can we talk about that? Can we talk about it for a second? Because I know we've not talked with anybody, I think, that has had to deal with being a parent of somebody with an addiction. Can we talk about that? Your role as a mother, we don't have to talk about him so much as just what that was like for you and how long and what you did to kind of make it through that period.
I remember I was talking to a neighbor, and I told her, I said, I'm so afraid I'm going to have to bury because I'll never forget the day that I opened up my front door and my oldest son was passed out on my front wall. And he was out with his friends, and they were doing what they call quad bars. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I know it had something to do with Xanax. There was more than one Xanax.
Yeah.
Okay? And his friends thought he'd died. And instead of taking him to the emergency room, they brought him to his house and dumped him.
Well, with friends, hi.
Exactly. And that's what I found in the front yard was my son just laying there. And I thought he was dead. And I remember I went to another neighbor's house who I knew when she was younger, she had done drugs. And I had never touched a drug in my life. So I didn't, and she got him up, and her boyfriend at the time said, depending on what he had taken them, they can't pump his stomach. You got to keep him awake. And I don't even think to this day he remembers what all happened. But it was very scary for me because I really thought my son had buried 4 or 5 of his friends in like 4 months. He overdosed or died in some way due to drugs. And I was very scared for him then because, back then when you're that young, your friends are everything to you, And I remember my brother telling me, you need to just kick him out of the house. Well, it wasn't an option for me. It just wasn't an option for me, And it was probably the most scared I've ever been in my life, being a And I didn't know a lot of it. I didn't know how to handle because I never went down that road, and a lot of it I didn't realize. If I had realized what they were doing, that's why I said my granddaughter won't get away with nothing because my son did everything, So his daughter won't get away with nothing. But when they would be in my backyard smoking pot, and I didn't know what pot smelled like, so I didn't realize that's what it was that I was smelling. And then I remember in my kitchen, my spoons were all black underneath. And I didn't realize that meant they were putting drugs in my house. I had no idea. I'm like, why are my spoons burning? I had no idea what was going on because I didn't know, And so I'm not sure that not knowing was the best. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not that I wanted to go down that road, but I wish I had known more, so I could spot it more. Because I remember my son, him and his wife, she had a daughter, he had a daughter. And his daughter, or his stepdaughter, was going down a bad road. And he called me and said, Mom, what do you regret about the road that I went down? I said, I wish I could have done more tough love. I wish I could have sent you to jail when I knew I should have. Called the police and said, this is what's going on. Y'all need to fix this. But I just, I said, you don't know the love that a parent has for you until you become a parent yourself. And I said, I just didn't have the heart to send you to prison. I wasn't the one. Now, he went to prison. Don't get me wrong. Straighten him out. He went to prison when his daughter was a baby. And I think being separated from his daughter is what really straightened out my son. And God, don't get me wrong, God did too. But I couldn't be the one to send. That's his law. I was always the one that tried to protect him. And I said, you can't always protect your kids. You just won't. There's something to be said for tough love.
I think I want to think I could. I want to think I could do that.
That's the hardest. As a mother,
I've been tempted before. Where you find yourself like protecting,
yeah.
as opposed to.
That's your first instinct is to protect that child.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways, especially when they go down the road of drugs and alcohol. Protecting them is the worst thing it really is, because it's like, they need to realize what. Now, I did call the police on my son one time, but it was only because he came to me one time and I said, "You're not going to do." He was going to go someplace or something. And his attitude, I was a single mom, his attitude was, okay, if I was going to do it, what could you really do? Yeah. I said, I don't know what's going on. So I called the police and I said, I need two of the ugliest, baddest cops you got on the force. I need you to come and straighten out a kid.
Yeah.
But my dad was, and usually I called my dad, don't get me wrong, and he drove from here to LaForte every time I'd call. This time I called the police and I said, I have a 16-year-old you need to straighten out. When they left, he was crying. He said, because they told him, you go in the backyard and your mom don't know where you're at, you're a runaway. You belong to us at that point.
So he was young.
Oh, yeah, 16.
Yeah.
I was 16.
What age did he start and finish?
My son got into drugs when he was 14. And then he got out of drugs when he was like 20. So he was in drugs for a while. But like I said, he doesn't really touch really anything so now. But when he went to prison for 2 years. And mom went up there to see him and and everything. And my dad went to see him and when he got out, I was sitting there waiting on him. So, I thank God, because it's only God my son survived. It's only God my son survived. He should not have. The morning I found him in my yard is the day he should have died. And it's only God who gets his grace. It's very slow. And I tell Scott all the time, you're only alive by the grace of God. You are meant for greatness.
Yeah, I don't have to I haven't had to deal with anything like that, but I just think, because, when you say you see him doing things they shouldn't be doing, like my son does snuff, and it stresses me out because we have just huge histories of cancer. So I spend all my time.
How old is your son?
Yeah.
How old is your son?
He's 23 and he's 6'2", just like yours. No beard. He's a welder. Like, and I just walk around going, I hate that. Why don't you spit that out? Put that in my hands. Spit it out.
Oh, yeah. My son came out here to him, my middle son. I was working part-time at what was Scott's store at the time. Yeah, okay, yeah. I was working there. He comes in to buy dip. And I said, no.
Yeah.
And he says, what do you mean, no? You can't say no. I think I can. I'm your mother. I can say no. He says, Mom, you have to sell it to me. No. There's a store up the street that will sell it to you. I won't even sell it to you.
Yeah.
He says, why won't you sell it to me? I didn't teach you to do it. I didn't know it when you were younger. I ain't selling it to you. I'll tell Scott, I will get fired, but you're still not going to be sold it. Not now. And he went up to the line to buy it. I understand. I told him, no, I'm not selling it to you.
That and the vape, and then that makes me go, but we'll go back to snuff. Like, I don't want you doing the vape either. Like, go back to snuff.
Yeah. My mom and dad smoked when I was growing up. And my mom started smoking because she got mad at my dad. Okay?
Seems legit. Seems legit.
So she gets mad at my dad. She starts smoking to teach him a lesson. Well, then he buys her this gold cigarette thing, this thing, cigarette thing.
Yeah. The little book thing.
Cigarette base. It made her mad.
Yeah.
Of course, now she smokes. But, the only person she hurt was herself. But, yeah, that's why my mom started smoking. And then, but I've never smoked. Never smoked, never done anything like that. So when my kids started smoking and dipping, I'm like, I didn't teach you to do it. I didn't sell them. I worked at both little stores around here. I didn't sell them in either store. And then came in the boat. I will pay over there to you.
Yeah, I would, if I'd find he lived with us up until this year. He's moved out this year, but all last year, like, especially during COVID, because he wasn't working and going to school, he was here. And I would just go, like, find one Shake it, stuff in it, trash. Shake it, stuff it, trash. See my snuff? Nope,
Kids
not me.
knew mom was coming to their house. They would hide their cigarettes or hide their dip
Yeah,
or whatever they were doing
yeah.
because they weren't going to find any when mom left them. And I'm okay with it.
Me
I
too.
tell my husband all the time, if anything ever happens to him, I'm living the rest of my life driving my kids crazy. They drove me crazy now. I'm going I'm gonna go to one house, and when I get tired of driving, I'm just gonna go to the other house, and then when I have a camper. See, I can go and sit in the camper for about 2. And then I'll go home, and then when I get tired of living at home, I'm coming back to crazy again.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, I do miss mine, and I miss seeing them because they've all moved out now. But I am enjoying the empty nest life, so
Yes, sir, yeah.
I miss them. But yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. So
I always said I never understood how parents could just let their kids move out.
yeah, let them move out, right?
Oh my God, my babies! I can't imagine them living anywhere but here. Then I have 3 teenagers in the house. I've
Mhm.
actually paid for my kids to live in their apartment.
Yeah.
Pay their no, don't come home. Mom will pay your apartment. You stay there.
Well, that's what I said. Is I have the 3, and they have all moved out. Mariah moved out when she graduated high school. She went to college and hasn't moved back. Same thing with Ariel. Then Cody went, but then COVID hit, so he did move back. But I forgot where I was going with that. That I don't want them to move away. Like I've had such a tight, or I feel like I've had such a tight grip of trying to control them and keep them, close. That this year, my daughter moved to Denver. She packed up and moved to Denver, just like I'm moving.
Oh, but she
I got a
couldn't.
job. Bye. Yeah, and it was just like I didn't ask. I mean, she's 20. She's 27. Right? She doesn't have to ask.
No, that was 29.
Huh?
All right.
No. When she moved, she was 27
she's 27.
or 27, 28. But she just called and was literally like, I got a job. I'm going to Denver next weekend. Like it was that fast. And then Cody turned around this year and the same thing. He's like, hey, I'm moving out. And you're thinking, no, y'all are not. Like, no, you're not.
Exactly. No.
Just for the record, they all did.
My youngest son is 35, and he works in Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
close to Chicago. I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't want to live in Illinois, son. Stay in Texas. I'm like, come on, Chicago. Of course, he had a camper and a truck and a car. Mom takes off work to drive him to Illinois. He flies mom back, and it's like leaving him out there was just the hardest thing I'd ever. And he's 35 years old, but he comes home every winter. So that's a good thing about him. He's not married, just him and his dog. Of course, like another dog. Yeah, that's right. But just him and his dog. So he comes home. December, you can't work. He lays asphalt, is what he does.
Oh, okay.
But in December, you can't lay asphalt in Illinois anymore because there's too much snow. So he comes home from December to April.
Yeah. Well, see,
April,
in
they all go
Texas,
back.
you can lay asphalt 12 months a year. 12 months. Yeah. I said in Texas, you could lay asphalt 12 months out of the year.
Exactly. See, when
Makes
you
sense.
have more construction in Texas, it lasts 40 years because they never start. Yeah. But in Illinois or places like that, they got to start and they got to stop. They got to get it done.
Yeah. But I honestly have come to the realization that, especially with Mariah moving to Denver, that's, I think, 100% God. He's going, you know what? I need to work on her and I need to work on you, and y'all need to be like apart because otherwise I'm just like this, So I definitely am thinking that, okay, God, fine, And I do keep joking that I thought, okay, God, I can do this because Colorado touches Texas. Well, if you've looked at a map, Colorado does not touch Texas at all. Tell me, how many grandkids do you have?
I have 4 grandkids that are blood to me. I have 8 grandkids altogether.
Okay.
4 boys and 4 girls.
Oh, nice, even.
Yeah. My oldest son, the only good child he had was a girl. My middle son had 2 boys and a girl. And then my oldest son married a woman with a girl. And then my middle son is with a woman who has 3 kids.
Okay.
So they're kind of the Brady Bunch, 3 and 3.
Yeah.
But with 2 boys and a girl, 2 boys and a girl. So I have 4 boys and 4 girls.
So your first grandchild, what do you remember about them being born and making you a grandma for the first time?
Well, when Austin was born, and everybody to this day says I'm the one that saved his life. What happened is my son was in Egypt. We got a job when he got out of college, and they sent him to Egypt, so he wasn't there when my youngest son was. I was pregnant with my youngest son, his heartbeat cord got wrapped around his neck, and his heartbeat kept taking a nosedive. Well, they had her hooked up to a monitor. And I was sitting there by her, and I was watching the monitor, and every time she had a contraction, the heartbeat took a nosedive. Nobody noticed that but me because of what I went through with Alice. So I said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." Never said nothing to anybody. Walked down to the nurse's station, and I said, "Okay, this is the way it is. This is my grandchild. Y'all need to pull this monitor up because there is a problem. Every time she has a contraction, the baby's heartbeat takes a nosedive. You let anything happen to my grandson, and I will go crazy on you people." You thought that was being rude.
You're right. You were sweet.
That punished her. When I got back to her and sat down, they said, "Where'd you go?" Yeah, because she was in labor. I just had to go talk to someone. I didn't want to tell anybody anything because I went in there to even a minute before the nurse came. What? A cesarean. Well, then as soon as the nurse says we're having a cesarean, I had 30 people around me going, "What's wrong?"
Yeah.
You would told them something, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I told them. Every time she had a contraction, the heartbeat took a nosedive, and that's what it was. The umbilical cord was right around his neck. Well, you could say, and they will tell you today.
You did.
Mamma, thank you.
Yeah. But you also, I also am super enthralled with finding, when they say, everything happens for a reason. So, you had to deal with that with your own son, only to tuck that away for 20 years, 30 years to be able to use it again. And you go, that's why I had to deal with that 30 years ago.
Well,
I'm super impressed with that.
With Alex, my youngest child, his due date was December the 18th. His birthday is January the 10th.
Mm-hmm.
I carried that child for 10 months. And yes. And the doctors that I had, he was old enough to have delivered Moses. And that's what I told him. I said, "I'm not an elder. I'm not curing this kid for 2 years. We're going to take this child and you're taking him today." Okay. Now, this is after I'm standing on top of the examination table. You're standing? I'm standing. I asked him, because I was going to have my tubes tied. And I said, because yeah, sure. And the doctor
say whatever you want.
The doctor tells me, "I can't do that. It's illegal." To tie your tubes? No. Oh, sorry. No, I was wearing my tubes, so I skipped something. I'm sorry. And I said, "Instead of taking out of my tubes, just take out my uterus."
Or a hysterectomy.
Wasn't going to have any more kids. Yeah. So I figured, why deal with anything? The monthly cracker, why deal with any of that? He said, "I can't do that. It's illegal." So at this point, I'm like, "Excuse me?" So I get up, standing on top of this, Bill's begging me to get down. And I said, "Wait a minute. I can tell you to kill," because at that point, you can have an abortion until 9 months. I said, "I can tell you to kill my unborn child because it's my body and my choice, but I can't tell you to take out an organ I no longer need. What's wrong with this picture here?" I was livid. Absolutely livid. Okay. So I said, "This baby comes out today or I find me a new doctor." He says, "Honey, there's no doctor that's going to see you at 9." I said, "I may not be a doctor and I may not be as smart as you, but if I go to any doctor or hospital and announce I'm 9.5 months pregnant, I think they'll see me." So he leaves and comes back and he says, well, they can't get you until the morning. I'll see you at 5 o'clock. I said, don't be late because I won't be. So I get to
Tell
the
me later, I'm doing
hospital.
it myself.
Well, after your first one, you can basically do it yourself. You know, and so, but you had just not gone into labor. No, I had never gone into labor. Oh, but my first son, my water broke on Thursday. On a Monday, he was born on Thursday, and the only reason why I went in labor then was because I took castor oil. My second child, yeah, my mom gave me, yes, from your brother, yes, that's from my mom. She took me out to eat, bought me a bottle of castor oil, and said, okay, because she said if I didn't go into labor, it wouldn't hurt the baby, you know. But if I was ready to go into labor, I would go into labor. And I did. My middle child, they induced labor. And with Alex, they induced labor. Well, when I got to the hospital, they're like, I haven't received it yet. It's that stupid doctor that I'm taking, you know. Well, that's when they realized that his heartbeat had probably been taking a nosedive for probably the last month. Yeah. So.
Well, there's something to be said about mother's intuition. And
Oh,
I definitely hope doctors are listening to mothers now.
You don't need to listen. I don't figure after you have the first one, you're really only paying the doctor for cash.
Yeah.
You know, come on.
Yeah, I did say, had I known what I know now, I would have had home births, like with the last two, because I think I would have done really well with the home birth, especially with the third one, because homeboy, it took us longer to get there than it took him to come out. He was walking out.
With my first one, I laid 18 hours. My second one, I had him in a little old country hospital. But the whole hospital and doctor's office was one building.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how small it was. My in-laws came out there, and the nurse checked me and said, I went from like 0 to 4 in 4 hours. She's like, she's going to be here all day. Well, the only options you had was either asleep or natural. We had no anesthesiology. Right.
Yeah. Wait, you said a sleeve? What is that, an epidural?
Yeah, no. You either went natural, completely natural, or you had to be asleep. So sleep, yes.
Wait, what's a sleeve?
Asleep.
If it should asleep. Okay, I thought you said a sleeve. I was like, what's a sleeve and what are we putting it on?
I remember laying my head back on the pillow, closed my eyes, and I said, God, I can't do this all day. You've got to do something. I went from 4 to delivery in 15 minutes.
Nice.
I opened my eyes and I looked at my mother-in-law and I said, I have to push. And she said, don't push. And by the time she convinced the nurse to come back, because the nurse had just left, his head was laid on the bed. And I was cooking. And the nurse wasn't allowed to deliver babies. They couldn't find the doctor because they told me it's going to be all day. And she's like, please don't push. And I'm like, somebody better catch, because I wasn't stopping. It's like, he's coming. And they got me delivered finally, and they got the doctor in there and he delivered it. But I mean, he was halfway on the bed before I even. They kept saying, please don't push. I'm like, you don't push.
Yeah, we had my cousin on a couple of weeks ago, and she's a labor and delivery nurse, and she said that's sometimes the hardest lesson to teach young doctors is you have to listen to the mother. Like you have to listen to what she said.
Yeah.
Because
and when I got pushing pains, don't tell me not to, because I may tell you I'm not, but I am. It's like you can't help it. Exactly. I mean, that baby's coming. It's coming. Be ready.
You don't get to pick.
And that's one thing I knew with Alex, that there was something wrong, because I never got pushing pains. I never got nothing with him. There was nothing. And instead of being born face down, he was also born face up. And I knew, as soon as labor hit, I started my labor, I told my husband, I said, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Well, the nurse had convinced him there wasn't anything wrong. It had just been 4 years, and I don't know. Well, he made the mistake of telling me that. So I grabbed him by his shirt, and I'm screaming to him, going, If I didn't remember, it didn't take me long to remember. Tell her there's something wrong. He backed out and he says, you go tell her there's not something wrong. I don't think I should go back in right now.
I definitely think there's something to be said about listening to. I mean, I understand first time moms that they don't know what's going on. But after you've done it once, you know what's going on.
You just know.
It comes back real quick.
Because my water broke with my first one on a Monday. And what happened, I was sitting at my mom's table, and I remember running to the bathroom, apologizing because water was just all over the floor. And I'm like, and she told me, she says, I think the water broke. So, of course, I'm 19 years old. I called the nurse, and she says, are you still drinking water? I said, no, baby. That baby just moved under the ground. You just had an accident. It's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I go to the doctor. Well, I didn't mention it to the doctor. The nurses sound logical to me. So I go into labor. I get checked by the nurse, and she's feeling on the bed like this. And I was with her husband. I feel like this. And a long nurse comes in 2 seconds later, and she's checking me, and she's feeling on the bed. And she looks at me and says, honey, when's the water? And I said, it did. She says, oh, yes, it did. I can feel the baby's hair. Now I looked at my husband. I said, my water broke on Monday. The nurse was as white as a sheet because this was Thursday.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, don't you have to have amniotic fluid for them to live?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was Thursday, and they wheeled me right in there, and they're like, this thing's got to come down. And no, it was God that he was first born alive, and secondly, it was not wrong with breath.
Yeah. Yeah.
They did not expect him to be born. They knew he was alive because they had a heartbeat, but they did not expect him to be born without brain damage. But he was. Of course, he developed brain damage later on in life. So,
that's fine. Well, Mary, what is your, we were talking about your grandkids. So what is the biggest difference for you between being a mother and a grandmother?
Well, my
What difference do you see yourself? They what?
They do no wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely no wrong at all. I have never in my life, to this day, and my grandchildren will tell you, ever said no to my oldest grandson wanted bread one day. That's all he wanted to eat one day. Well, at my house, that's all he wanted. Kenny says, Mom, you have to feed him something besides bread. Well, when he wants something besides bread, I'll feed him something besides bread. You know what I mean? But that's just the way it is. I said, he's like, Mom, you can't do that. I can do anything I want to. I'm normal. You know, you're the parent. You're the one that says no. You're the one that gets on to them. You're the one that corrects them. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so did that come from living with your grandma, when you were young and all that?
Hey, my parents didn't say no to my grandkids. I'm not saying no to them. It's the way it is.
I think yesterday we were with Cody and Briar. So my son's girlfriend has a daughter, and they've been together a little over a year. And Briar just turned 2, and so we're in the 2 stage, which is basically hell for everybody but her. She's fine, but so yesterday. We had a long day, and she hadn't half. And last night they were here, and she did something. She looked like she was spitting at him like that, like Cody. And he goes, hey, in that man voice. And I was like sitting on the couch, and she run over there and, kind of curled up by me. And I said, you got to be sweet, girlfriend. Like, you can't be ugly. And then she got down and went over there, and she did it again. Like, it's like she spit at him.
Mm-hmm.
He stood up, and she turned and lit a shuck. And the hardest thing for me to do was to go, because he needed to address it. I mean, I don't want her spitting on people. They're literally, I was just sitting there she tucked, like she did like that, and I had to pick her up, and he took and walked her in the other room, and, and I just sat there, and Dwayne goes, he goes, what did she do? I was like, well, she spat at him. So I feel like we can't let that go. But that was really hard because I really wanted to go, she's fine. You probably deserve to be spit on.
My son spit at my mother one time, and he was a little boy. course, I spanked him. And then my mom's like, well, I wouldn't have told you he did it. I knew you were going to spank him for it.
Yeah. So then don't
I
tell me.
remember my son, as I was living with my parents, threw himself on the ground, kicking and screaming in the middle of the living.
Yeah.
So I pick him up, take him to the bedroom, and spank him. But he comes in and says, you are not allowed to spank my grandchildren in my house. So I live with him. So I said, hey, the next time he did something wrong, I went outside in the backyard and spanked him. My dad said, what are you doing? I'm in your hands.
I remember one time she was little, and now she's the oldest, and she's extremely strong-willed. And when she was probably 2 or 3, something like that, she had heard one of her dad's brother curse in Spanish, and she had turned around and said that to his mother, and I lost it, like lost my mind, and snatched her up and went in the bathroom, locked the door. I mean, I think I had her because she was stout. I mean, like tough kid. When they say, like gentle parenting, that's crap. Gentle parenting is for gentle kids. She's feral, and we had to fight it out. I think I had her in a headlock and was like ramming soap in her mouth because I had told her, like we had addressed it before, and his poor mother was standing at the door, just banging on the door, going, "She's fine. Don't spank her. Oh, I'm not spanking her. We're past spanking. We are. I mean, headlock, mouth."
I remember I washed my son's mouth out with soap one time.
Yeah, like this was bad because we had dealt with it before, and I had told her, and his brother just had free reign, with his mouth, whatever. And I guess because we thought it was in Spanish, it was fine, but it was not fine because she popped off something. I mean, I lost it, lost my mind. They were all sitting. I think because it had 2 doors, so her dad was on one end, and she was like a Jack and Jill thing, and I had locked both doors. Going to town, and they were both like, "She's fine. They'll spank her." Oh, we're not spanking. Don't worry. But we're gonna stop cursing. That's what we're gonna do.
Exactly.
I mean, we never had it again.
My mom always made. I remember my kids were growing up. My mom took a cake decorating class after we all moved out of the house. So she always made my kids' birthday cakes. We always had big birthday parties for them. My dad was a shrine for the Nelsons, and he was in the shrine circus. So he was a clown. And so he always did he was a clown for the birthday parties. He'd make, things with balloons and stuff like that. So we always had the best entertainment and stuff because we always had clowns at my
Yeah.
big birthday party. My youngest son my dad came over, he would be hip, and he would start getting dressed and come out. He would hold my youngest son, get a little bit more dressed, come out, Once he put that nose and that hair on, that was it. My son wouldn't go near him. He'd scream and scream and scream if his papa went near him.
Yeah. That's funny.
But my kids loved it because they had the biggest, beautiful cakes and the best entertainment.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah.
And they were great grandparents.
Yeah.
My parents saw my son do everything. My oldest son do everything. Even, they go see my son when he was in prison and all that stuff, and bought him his Bibles and stuff when he was in prison and stuff they saw. And I think that's, my dad always looked at my son as this is where I should have been when I was growing up. And I think that's why he just saw the fact that, it was some of him and my son, I guess, so, yeah. But they were very good people, and they lived a good life. Mom was 84, my dad was 85. They were 11 months apart. So, yeah. My mom was September 22nd, and my dad was Halloween. I remember one time I forgot my mom's birthday, and she got real upset at me for it. And I said, well, Mom, change your birthday to a holiday like Dad did, and we could.
And then we'll remember.
Yeah, make it easy for me to remember. They were only 11 months apart.
Yeah. Well, you're very blessed because met your parents and they were always really sweet to us. And I know Mom and Dad really enjoyed having them as friends. And I know that y'all loved your Alaska trip. So definitely blessed to grow up with your parents. And I appreciate you taking time to tell us your story and to talk about your life. The whole point of this is just to share our lives and to see how it resonates with people. So I definitely think your story is going to resonate. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Thank you, guys. I know it's late, so I appreciate you hanging out with us.
I love talking with my mom and dad.
Yeah.
My grandmother.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't know my grandmother because, well, another story. When my mom was in her piece, she started going to the chain. And one of the first things that happened is she stopped having a cycle. Well, she went through a complete 9-month pregnancy when she first started going through the change. Her body was reacting as a pregnancy. Everything was reacting as her being pregnant. And my grandmother, before she died, she never knew I was pregnant.
Yeah.
But I remember her looking at my mom going, when this making beautiful nursery? It was talking about her brain. And my grandmother died in December. And I found I was pregnant with Scott in January.
Yeah.
And so my mom went to the doctor because she still didn't know whether or not she was pregnant or not. She had her tubes tied and everything, but her body just went through a complete pregnancy.
So you found out you're pregnant, but your mother thought she was pregnant.
She was pregnant.
Oh,
so she goes, so she goes to the doctor, and the doctor asks her, do you want to be pregnant? She's like, what do you mean I want to be pregnant? My daughter's pregnant, and I'm expecting my grandchild. Why would I be pregnant? But her body was a complete 9-month pregnancy. And when the 9 months was over, she just didn't have any more menstrual cycles. She didn't have baby, of course, but her body just went through that. And then, of course, I got pregnant with Scott and had Scott. I think my mom was 42 when I was 45, something like that. So,
yeah.
But anyway, my grandmother died in December, and I was pregnant with Scott in January. And when I moved in with my parents, that room was made into a house.
That room gets to be a nursery.
It did.
So you have a long legacy of godly women.
I do.
Great grandma.
Yes. So when I get to heaven, I'm gonna have a lot of penguins waiting for me to greet me when I get there.
And that feels over into your head.
Yeah.
And all that,
Yeah, my grandmother was the same way. We did no wrong. We did no wrong. In fact, one time I upset my grandmother, and she called me a heifer. I didn't know what a heifer was. As a child, I was just devastated. My grandmother called me that hard name. No idea what it was.
Because I call everybody a heifer.
My grandma ever said, except for the time she cussed him.
Well, yeah, her son, but I think it's the dad. It's Sergeant. He was really a horrible person when he was younger. So, of course, my dad wasn't any better, but my dad was perfect in her.
Yeah. Well, and she was 70, so that's just the threshold to say whatever. So, and be forgiven. I feel like it's in the Bible somewhere.
My grandmother was, she never had a license to drive. No, never had a license to drive. So she had people pick her up for work, or people took her to church, and that kind of thing. But she never missed church. She was church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. She was there. I can still see her little hands raised in the air, crying to God, and she was just. She was. That woman was a godly woman, And so when she did that, we were all like, it's like, and she's like, I should have just doubted you when you were young.
Too far. Too far.
I mean, she never in her life, it's like my mom one time, because my mom was raised very sheltered. So when she got mad at my dad one time, she tried cussing. She didn't know how to do it. And when she did it came out so backward. My dad started laughing. Was even there. But
Funny.
it was, it was funny because it really came out backward.
Yeah. Well,
And my dad's like, "What did you say?" So
well, Mary, I do appreciate you, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And like I said, I that we want these stories to resonate with other women, so I appreciate you being so candid and honest about your life. So for everybody who is listening, thank you again, and please be sure to rate and subscribe wherever you can get your podcasts. And thank you again. We will see you guys again next week.